Hello and welcome to Carnivore Renaissance channel. Today I have the great pleasure to speak with Dr. Miki Ben-Dor. He's a paleoanthropologist from Tel Aviv, Israel, and we've been talking about human evolution, human adaptation, and human nutrition. Just in case, if you notice that Dr. Ben-Dor or myself are dressed differently at some point during the interview, this is absolutely normal as we did record the interview twice due to some recording issues. Other than that, the interview was absolutely great. I really enjoyed getting so much knowledge from this man, and I hope you will too. Thank you for supporting the channel, subscribing, or sharing if you like the content. All the best to you, and see you soon. Bye bye. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here and welcome on the Carnivore Renaissance channel. Today I have a special guest, Professor Miki Ben-Dor from University of Tel Aviv, Israel. He is a specialist in paleoanthropology. Miki Ben-Dor, thank you for coming and welcome.
You're most welcome.
May I ask you to quickly introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what are your specialties in that field?
Okay, I actually got into this field at the age of about 52 when I retired and I decided not to work anymore because I always felt connected to hunter-gatherers and I felt that they are, all the genes that we have are genes of hunter-gatherers that evolved for 2.5 million years in completely different conditions than we are. And I ended up writing a book about it, which I translated to English not long ago. We can find it in Amazon under my name, Miki Ben-Dor. And that brought me into the subject. And after I retired, I decided, I didn't really know what I should do. Then I started frequenting the university as a free student. And interested in hunter-gatherers, but mainly from the mental side, not so much the physiological side. Just when I started writing the book and making the research, I realized that the biggest mismatch and the most important mismatch that we have between our genes and the environment is actually what we eat. So I decided to investigate that in a more serious manner, and I started studying for a PhD because I had already an MBA, by the way, from France, from INSEAD in Fontainebleau, and that's what I did until the age of 52. I worked in commercial situations, and then I started studying at Tel Aviv University and got a PhD. And and since then I've been practicing paleo, and then of course keto, and then carnivore. It's a way you see that each time you make a step, it's actually you're feeling better. Even though you thought that you could not feel better after paleo or after keto, still you feel better when you do carnivore. So that's what I do. Today I mainly research human evolution because through the study of nutrition, I came across insights about human evolution, and I just in the end of this month I'm going to give a seminar at the Tel Aviv University about that. So I lecture on it and I write papers on it. That's what I do.
Okay, but let me get this right. So you wrote the book before studying. Is that correct?
I wrote the book after about 2 years going like a free student. And I decided that I have to do something for the community because paleo was not so well known in Israel. And I thought I'll write a book so the people. I also had a internet site uh, that supported paleo. So I decided to write the book to contribute, like because money you don't get any money. You're not making any money from writing books about paleo. Uh, so that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to just spread the the information in Hebrew. And now after the AI and everything, it became like much easier to translate it. So I translate, and some people ask for it, so I translated it to English, and it's now available in Kindle, in recording, so you can also listen. Audible, yeah. So yeah, and a paper as well. So
This will be interesting because I guess paleo has a different definitions. I guess some people use the word and like they apply it in a very different ways, I guess. So I just would like you to clarify a few notions for the audience who might not be familiar with the certain terms. So could you please quickly define for us the following terms: Paleolithic, Pleistocene, and Neolithic?
okay, Paleolithic, or we in Hebrew we say Paleolithic, but I think the Americans say Paleolithic. Uh, it's a period between 2.5 million years and about 10,000 years ago that humans used stone tools, and this is why it's called lithic. Lithic is a stone. So it's the past stone like stone. Uh, you know, that's the Paleolithic. Uh, Mesolithic is the last period, is the most recent period of the Paleolithic. It's about depending where in different places of the world. In Europe, it's the last, I don't know, maybe 8,000 years or so, from 8,000, 10,000 years ago. And Neolithic is really when humans started to do agriculture, but was still using stone tools. So that depends. Like in the Middle East, it started 11,000 years ago. In Europe, it started about 5,000 years ago. In Africa, it started very recently. Uh, real agriculture. There used to be more like going with cows and things like that. So raising cows than doing agriculture. So in different places in the world at different times, but during the last 10,000 years, most of the world become agriculture. So
And Pleistocene is a period of Paleolithic, is that right?
Pleistocene, yeah, Pleistocene is really the geologic period that actually parallel the Paleolithic. So it's 2.6, I think, to I think something like 11,000 years ago. Mama, really, it's just the geological name for actually the same period.
To make it clear for the audience, so the Paleolithic and Pleistocene were together, and once we move towards Neolithic, Pleistocene changed as well.
Yeah, it's become Holocene. Holocene.
And that has an importance in what's following, right?
There's some change in the weather and the climate during the Holocene. The Holocene is a more stable period and warmer period than the end of the Pleistocene. The Pleistocene, during the last 2.5 million years, there were a lot of periods of ice. So it was like quite up and down in terms of temperature. And the Holocene is the last 10,000 years. It's more stable.
So they had climate change back then, right?
Oh yes, the I hate to say it, but this climate warming is nothing special whatsoever. I mean, we had during the Pleistocene even higher temperatures than we have today. Uh, the only thing is we didn't have cities that were built on the seashore. So, so the implications of rising sea level uh, are just you know yeah, and there were changes, and humans, when there was it was cold, they were moving south, and when it was warm, they were moving north in Europe. I mean, so yeah, no, the climate change, the climate always change, and change in amplitudes that are much higher than what we experience today. So I don't think it's, I don't know, the thing that whether humans caused it or not, I tend to think not. But you never tell.
There is another definition that we will discuss today. It's the human trophic level, as you wrote a very interesting paper on it. Could you define for people who don't know what it means, what human trophic level is?
Yeah, yeah. I The trophic level is very important because the trophic level is key in studying the evolution of animals, any living thing. It means really what position it holds in the food chain. Uh, and I found this question to be uh, more efficient than to ask how much meat he ate or something like that. Uh, Scientists tend to divide people, to categorize not people, just any animal based on what they eat, whether carnivore, omnivore, herbivore, frugivore, vor. Yeah, they eat. So uh, any animal, even the one that is sort of what's called omnivore, there are no real omnivore that are so flexible in what they eat. Some of them, because they are, in the end, for instance, I'll just give you an example. A wolf can eat berries, okay? And actually, when berries are available, he will not hunt. He will just, for days, gorge on these berries. But you cannot say that the wolf is flexible. If there are no animals around, he will just die. So, and the opposite picture is, let's say, chimpanzee. A chimpanzee can eat and sometimes does even hunt other animals, small animals, and eat them. But of course, you cannot, if there are no fruits around, he will not survive because he just cannot survive on hunting because his whole physique is not built for efficient hunting. The same as wolf. Wolf has teeth and speed and power to hunt, and not in competition with other animals. He will never be able to survive on plants. So even an omnivore, when you call somebody an omnivore or an animal an omnivore, it does not mean that it is completely flexible. And the same goes for humans. So humans, yes, we can eat plants, of course, and we ate plants, no question about it, for 2.5 million years. If before we ate, actually, we came from chimpanzees who actually survived on plants mainly. And later on, the chimpanzees, or not the chimpanzees, but the common ancestor with chimpanzees came off the trees, and he walked around in the forest and the savanna of Africa, and he probably mostly lived on plants. Uh, but we are not built to live on plants. And maybe we can go into it later whenever you want. But anyway, we are omnivores, but we were not flexible. Today, we can get any sort of food just going to the supermarket. But food, you need to get it first, and you have to be built to get it in competition with other animals. And humans are not built to get it, obtain it, and actually digest it, plant material, uh, as efficiently as other animals. Most plants have a lot of fiber in them, in nature. Okay, I'm not talking about domesticated plants. I'm talking about plants in nature. Even apples, when you find them in nature, they will have a lot of fiber. And we are, with our small colon, not built to extract a lot of energy from fiber. So, in competition with other animals, we just will not make good use of the plants. We will have to eat all day just to get enough energy, because if a lot of the energy that is stored in the plant, it will go to waste because we cannot utilize fiber. That's why I think trophic level is so important when you try to find out what we are, what we were. Uh,
You focused your work on which type of Homo, like you did. I think I heard before Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. Is that correct?
yes, yes, because we have the information. You know, Homo erectus uh, lived for 1.5 million years and was very successful species. We live, the Homo sapien exists only for about 300,000 years. And between us and Homo erectus, there are a lot of debates about it, but let's say the common thinking is that there was another species, at least, Homo heidelbergensis. Uh, but again, it was not uh, there for a long time. It was for a few 100,000 years. But Homo erectus is important to me because we have a lot of information about it, and we can say that it was a carnivore.
Okay. There's one last introductory question I want to ask you before we really start in detail. But there is something that bothered my mind for a long time. There is a common belief that tends to assume that our ancestors had a 30 years lifespan. People are saying, yeah, people back then, they used to live until 30 years old. So, are there any scientific proof in paleoanthropology that brings any validity to that statement?
This statement is true and untrue at the same time. It depends how you define it and what you define. If you take humans, and I will just refer to the recent hunter-gatherers that live, because it's just easier, but the principles stand the same. If you calculate the the average, let's say, age of hunter-gatherers, you'll come to about 45, 35. But it's it's not a good comparison. Why? Because the death of babies is about 200 times higher than what we have today. So there are a lot of zeros when you go to make the average. Okay? So every time you take to get to 35 average, for every baby that dies, you have to get somebody who lived to 70 in order to arrive at an average of 35. So the average uh, is just not the right measure. Uh, there is another measure that is being used, and this is the model age of death, which means at what age do most people die? So, uh, in hunter-gatherer, for example, in the United States, it's about 85. Okay, so what happens is, people die, and then there are not too many of them anymore. So at the age of 90, fewer people die. Yeah, because they just died before, and there are not so many left of them. So the model age of death in the United States is 85. The model age of death in the Hadza, which is in a tribe that lives in Tanzania, is 74. Most of the people that pass the age of 15 becomes grandmothers and grandfathers. So this is now think about it. They reach the age of 74 without any medical assistance, without social security, without anything. If there's a drought, there's a drought. If there is some kind of some illness, they get it. And they're even a small, let's say, if they hurt themselves, they don't have antibiotics. So with that, they still live a model age is 74. And when you go there, you find a lot of grown-up people. So this is the misunderstanding.
But when you find a bone from an ancestor, let's say in the Homo erectus era, you have a way to define how long that bone was.
No, no, it's not. It's not easy.
So how do people get to this 30 years old average thing if they cannot?
I think they're talking about recent hunter-gatherers. The average of
No, 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 no. I'm talking because that's the point. People are always saying, "Yeah, we got agricultural revolution, but now we're living much longer." And before, they refer to our ancestors as people not passing 30 years old. That's why I'm thinking in archaeology or paleoanthropology, can you?
no, no, not passing 30 years old. It just doesn't make sense. It's not true. I don't know where they get it. The only thing that they can say is that the average is sort of 35 or 30 or whatever. No, there's a good theory, for instance, that explains why humans, have to live longer. For instance, chimpanzees, if I said that the model year of death of the Hadza is 74, chimpanzees in the wild live 15 years. Okay? In zoos, they live to 45 years. So that should give you an idea what kind of protection, how much protection will extend your life, and actually should have extended our life much longer than we are living today. But of course, we eat what we eat, and etc., etc. There are all kind of other problems that we face. But if you go back in time, humans had to have a longer life because when you measure the productivity of a hunter, it reached the peak at about 40 years old. Because you have to know a lot. It's a very knowledge heavy area, hunting. You have to know where to follow, how to do, where to come. It's a whole area. And the proof is that the hunters The most efficient hunters are hunters at about 40 years old. Until about 20 years old, people in the group don't even contribute to cover their own food. So the hunters, the experienced hunters, have to supply food for all the young people, in most of the cases, the women, not all the food, because the women are also gathering food, but they are dependent on the experienced hunter for living. This is why, this is the theory, why humans became longer, they have longer life than expected for their size. Because if you put all the animals on a one function, you find that usually the length of life is a function of the size of the animal. So elephants live a very long life, and mice live short life. So if you put humans on that, we live longer than we should have by our size. And this is the explanation.
And as Homo erectus and Homo sapiens have a difference in size, is it correct to think that Homo erectus would live, despite the whole protection aspect, the potential of living was longer?
It was more or less the same size. It's not a very big difference. No, no. You know, it's not like we have 10,000 samples of Homo erectus that we can safely say what exactly was the size. The best sample that we have is called the Turkana boy. He was like 11 or something years old, and so researchers can only estimate what would have been his final size. So it's not like we really know exactly what the size was, but I don't think it was very different. It was not very different from our size today.
The work you've done on the paper you wrote about the human trophic level, in that paper, you show that studies trying to use modern hunter-gatherers groups' lifestyle in order to prove what our ancestors evolved on when speaking about nutrition is not a relevant approach, as we were comparing very different ecological context between modern hunter-gatherers and hunter-gatherers from early Paleolithic. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And this is, I think, in my opinion, it was one of the worst problem of paleoanthropology is this reliance on hunter-gatherers today. You can rely on hunter-gatherers today, and I wrote a special paper just for that. Uh, you can rely if you find, for instance, the same phenomena in the Arctic and in the equator. You can say, okay, this is a phenomena that is common to humans. For instance, sharing. Humans share the food. This is not so common among animals. Sometimes they share, but they share unwillingly. Like if you see lions or hyenas go at the corpse, so they sort of fight, but they allow each other to be there. But still, it's not sharing like humans. Humans actually, one hunter go get an animal, bring it to the tribe, and divide. And he is actually most of the time not responsible for the allocation of the parts to the various people, because he's like they don't want him to be biased for his family. So he is not responsible. So there are very strict rules about equal sharing of food. And this is a common phenomena regardless of the environment and regardless of the technology. But The problem is that when people look at the hunter-gatherers today, or it's not today, but let's say a few years ago, maybe a few tens of years ago, because today there are almost none left. They saw a lot of they saw like a very wide range. So you have groups that let's say have about 10% meat, and the rest is plants, and you have groups that have 100% meat and zero plants, like in the Arctic. So they decided that humans are specialized is they are specialized in flexibility. So this is why we have a large brain, so we can be flexible and eat whatever we want to eat. And this is a very, very, in my opinion, very wrong conclusion that is based on misguided interpretation of the ethnographical record. Uh, and you know, people just it's really you know, a real big problem. I just have one paper that was rejected because the guy there uh, said that you know, in the according to his studies with the Hadza, I am completely wrong. But the Hadza are using metal, so they are not using stones. They have bows and arrows. So bows and arrows actually in human evolution became available just about 50, 60,000 years ago. So that's it's about 2% of the evolution of humans. 98% we evolved without bows and arrows. So how can you compare? And by the way, they lived, and I've been there. I've been in Tanzania and visited the Hadza. They live in a bushy area. They don't live in savannah. Real savannah is open space, and you have big animals. You have elephants, you have rhinos, you have hippos. All these animals don't exist for the Hadza. They just not available there. So they have dogs, for instance. Dogs, hunting with dogs and hunting without dogs is completely different thing. Uh, they hunt pigs, and they say that they will never leave to hunt pigs without dogs. Uh, so, and then he wants to compare, or they want to compare it to a Homo erectus, which only had a spear, yeah, with a wooden tip. So the stone tip or spears appeared only 300,000 years ago with Homo sapiens. Before that, humans had only wooden spears. Now, with wooden spear, there's no way that you can hunt a smaller, fast-running target of an animal. So you were really limited to large animals. And it paid you to hunt large animals. And hunting large animals is a completely different story and requires completely different environment than these hunters of today. So whatever the return on hunting relative to the return on plants gathering today, it was not the same in you know, with Homo erectus, and there's even no way you can actually estimate it, because the economy of using stones change your life completely. You have to walk to the stone sources. You have to make the tools. They are heavy, so you don't carry them. You have to decide what you carry. You have to maintain the tools all the time. You have to make new tools because they lose their efficacy very quickly. Eh, It's completely different life. And whatever you see today, all that flexibility today was not available to humans as hunters before.
Okay, that's very interesting. But quite often, when I speak about the carnivore diet, most people who are not familiar with it think of carnivore as a full protein consumption right away. And I think it would be very useful to highlight and explain the key role of dietary fat in our human evolution in terms of adaptations and survival.
Okay, that's a good point. You know, somebody in the some scientists came to the conclusion that a lot of the explanation of nature are around limitations. So, and she gave an example, Einstein's theory of relativity, general relativity, that is based on the fact that the speed of light is limited. And the same, in my opinion, goes for the limit on protein consumption. So we are kind of a strange carnivore because we became carnivore very recently in zoological terms. So, for instance, all the carnivores that we know today became carnivores, like lions, wolves, etc., became carnivores about 30 million years, 30 million years ago. We became carnivores about 2 million years ago. So, in order to be a good carnivore, you have to be able to exploit energy from protein because most of the energy that you find in animals is in protein. Some of it, I will come to that, some of it is in fat. But if you take, for instance, cat, a cat actually has to get about 70% of their uh, energy from protein because all kind of metabolism in the body are dependent on that. Humans cannot turn more than about 35% of their energy from protein. So we have a limit on the amount of protein that we can use. However, that means that we have to take 60% from non-protein. Now, there are not many non-protein sources. It's just fat or carbohydrates. That's it. Sorry. So carbohydrates come from plants, and fat come from plants and animals. The fact that humans were carnivore means that they actually got most of their energy from, or most of the non-protein energy from fat. And it makes a lot of sense because the return on hunting is about 10 times the return on plants, on obtaining plants.
So the energetic return, for the people who don't understand, maybe means that is the calorie or the energy you would spend hunting versus what you receive per hour, right?
Energetic return. In other words, you invest so much energy in finding, in extracting, in preparing the plant, the food. So this is the energy that you spend, and you get the energy that is stored in the food. So this is the net is the return. So the net return on hunting, when you calculate the caloric content of what you hunt versus what the caloric spending on hunting, is 10 times that of plants. This is in recent hunter-gatherers. I think it's much higher for Homo erectus, but we leave that for now. But 10 is enough to make a point. So, so humans actually had to obtain fatty animals. And that becomes the main criteria. And this is not my work. This people came to that conclusion, researchers came to that conclusion already in the 1980s, that actually the need for fat and the fat content in the animal was the main criteria of which animal to hunt. So, so, so if you take the relative return, energetic return, it means that most of the non-protein component came from fat. So that means about 50-60% fat in the diet on a common basis every day. That's the conclusion.
And would it be correct to say that this adaptation to fat through evolution has shaped hominins' gut morphology, allowing them to specialize into carnivore species, into a carnivore species?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's a lot of science. Uh, we have I think 70, more than 70% smaller colon than a chimpanzee. And colon is where the fiber energy gets extracted by the bacteria, which, by the way, produce fatty acids. Yeah, short fatty acids as a byproduct, and we or other animals that use fiber as a source of energy actually get the byproduct of the bacteria that is doing the fermentation in the colon. so, so just the fact that our colon became much, much smaller is already a testimony to the fact that the plant food became much less important in our nutrition. Uh, on the other hand, the small intestine, this is where the fat get absorbed, is 60 over 60% longer than chimpanzees. Uh, Also, genetics. We have genes that are adapted to consume fat compared to chimpanzees that have genes to adapted to exploit sugar from fruit. So yeah, you can find quite a few uh, signs that we are well adapted to to consume fat.
There is a more contemporary empirical study from the 1930s. I'm talking about Weston Price's book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, where he shows the detrimental effect of modern food on dental health in population who were not exposed to it before. So I believe that paleoanthropology has found the same kind of negative impact on the dental health at a certain time in our evolution. Could you please explore that specific aspect of our anatomy?
Right, right. Teeth are things that preserved very well in archaeological sites. So when you dig and you look for signs, you find stones, you find bones, and you find teeth. And wherever you find human teeth, or whenever you find you know, uh, the whole, this area, I forgot the name of it now. Anyway, you find that the teeth are perfect. In most cases, the teeth are really perfect. And you're talking about 40, 50 years old. For instance, there is a very famous Homo sapiens, the earliest Homo sapiens that is found in Morocco. And there's a picture, you can find it in the internet. And you look at the teeth, they are perfect, all of them. And this guy was about 40 years old. Nothing. Uh, when do you start seeing like real problems? Is exactly the in Morocco as well. Cave from 50,000 years ago, where they ate a lot of acorns, and the teeth were crooked, and they were really in bad shape. So, and this is the first time that I mean, there was teeth here and there with problem, but that you can see actually a population with a problem in the teeth, caries, a lot of caries in the teeth. Yeah. So this also can give you some idea about the nutrition of, and when humans really started to eat a lot of plants, and that's my, I published quite a few papers on that, is that actually what happened is because humans were dependent on large animals, because large animals are fatter as a percentage. Not only they have more fat because they are large, but they have more fat as a percentage of their calories, and and they maintain a lot of fat also during dry periods because they can eat low quality food. This is because they are big, they can exploit low quality food. So they keep the fat. So humans were really after the large animals. And the large animals disappeared, started to get extinct. In the end, there were just not enough of them, so humans had to go and do to eat plants, and they had to actually domesticate them for to get the right return, to get a high return. They had to domesticate them and sit down and not move and not spend energy moving around.
But in opposition to what many vegetarians or vegans are claiming about our dental anatomy, um, we don't, just to quote Professor Bart K, who makes fun sometimes saying we don't have sharp, pointy teeth. Your study tends to show that our dental anatomy, with, for example, the decreased size of the masticatory apparatus, has led us to a more carnivore specialization, right?
That's correct. The teeth of animals that use that use fiber as the main source of energy are flat. So they can actually prepare and increase the contact area of the fiber. So they actually sort of crush the fiber. This is their role. And they also move from side to side. If you look at cows, how cows chew, they move the teeth, the mandible from side to side, and so to crush and actually to prepare the fiber for the stomach, so it has a higher uh, contact area with all the uh, liquids there. So if you compare our teeth to the teeth of our predecessors, the Australopithecans, uh, we have teeth, we have cusps in our teeth, and somebody built a machine. He got a grant. I think it cost him almost $500,000 to build a machine that sort of simulate chewing. And after a few experiments, he said that human teeth are actually adapted to cut meat and not to deal with fiber. So, and it makes sense. And these teeth actually first appeared in Homo erectus, uh, and they're completely different in size and in shape than the teeth of our predecessors. They're smaller, they're smaller, uh, very much smaller, especially uh, the back ones. Uh, the molar teeth are smaller and a different shape. Different shape. They are actually built to catch the because if they are flat, the meat just sort of run to the sides, and you cannot cut it. But with the cusps that we have, we hold the teeth, and then we are able to cut it. Another thing that probably enabled this reduction in size is the fact that we use stone tools to cut the meat. So we didn't really have to cut it, to do a lot of cutting or a lot of using of the teeth to prepare the meat for consumption. And of course, the fact that we ate a lot of fat, so fat is even less demanding as far as cutting than meat, and certainly less demanding than fiber. There is a paper that answered that question exactly, but not fully. Uh, and they did study how uh, how much you have to get, what is the mastication stress if you cut or you don't cut the meat. So if you get a big chunk of meat to your mouth and start to try to chew it, of course it will take time. But if you cut it to small pieces, it's easy. And the chewing time is very, very quick. So, and humans had stone tools 200, 2.5 million years ago that actually had signs of them that they were used to cut meat. So really, we did not need the teeth of a lion in order to cut meat. We use stone tools. We use tools to get them. So we didn't need the big nails and we didn't need the speed. We used our brain for that, and we built tools. So this is the answer to the vegans. Uh, it just we are a carnivore, but we are a carnivore. We are a smart carnivore that build tools and that accumulate know-how. And for instance, we don't follow animals by the smell because our nose is about 1.5 meters above the ground. Uh, but we know how to read the whatever the animals live on the ground, the signs that they live on the ground. A good tracker can tell you when the animal, whether it was sick and whether it was. It's unbelievable. I was in a meeting a few years ago in Europe somewhere, and one of the researchers said that she took one of the girls back to the tribe from a school or something, and they were driving in the car, and as they were driving, the girl said, "Stop, stop! My father passed here." She identified the tracks of her father by from the car with the speed of riding in the car. She said, "My father passed here about 2 hours ago." So this is how we track animals with our mind.
Yeah, I remember I went to Gabon in Central Africa in 2019, and we did. There is a scientific research center for gorillas, but they're not gorillas like in Rwanda or Congo from the mountains. They're from the plains, and they've been hunted for quite some time, so they're not so easy with humans. So we had to go with two people from the village, and we were only 5 people to go. And they're in a kind of an island. It's quite big though, but so they're in that place, but it's huge. And at some point, there is a main track, and you see this, forest, equatorial forest, on one side, on the other side. And the trackers, people from the village, they were looking at things on the floor. But for me, I was like, "There's just grass, and what is he saying?" Anyway, and then he said, "This way," right? So we went for another 2 hours without finding them. So we could have gone to the complete opposite side. And then all of a sudden, he was calling the gorillas with certain noise, and then we hear this. And I'm like, whoa, right? So just to acknowledge what you're saying, yeah, we did develop that ability.
Yeah. So vegans, they have good some of the good arguments, but this is not one of them.
But maybe, and that's not to insult anyone, but I feel that a lot of vegans or vegetarians, like, they tend to live in urban areas, a lot of them, and I think that that disconnection between living close to a very natural environment with a certain type of fauna, and living in a building and having like 4 or 5 pharmacies down the streets, and like thinking that you're saving the planet living in a complete urban area. I don't know, it's just maybe that explains why they might see it in a very romantic way, maybe.
Yeah, look, all the extreme positions are questionable, but so is ours. I mean, of course, we have to see that animals are raised humanely, and but to cl- to to ask or to look for just everybody living as a vegan is not good for the. Even that is not good for the planet. Because there are quite a lot of resources that animals exploit that we cannot. So a lot of the grasslands, okay, that they've not enough water to do agriculture, but enough water just to raise grass, they can be exploited for to raise animals, but they cannot be exploited to farm. So why waste them just because you don't like to kill animals? But again, on the other hand, we have to be more humane. I mean, the way we raise pigs, for instance, is atrocious.
I don't think there are anyone in the carnivore or keto community that praise or who agrees with the kind of industrialized way of farming animals. I don't think I've heard anyone saying, yeah, that's great.
No, and we know that meat that was raised naturally is better, is more, is better. I'm not saying that meat that was not raised naturally is non-consumable. It is, but of course, we should always prefer meat that was raised naturally, as naturally as possible.
There's a point that was very, very, very interesting in your study. Um, Maybe because I studied, social anthropology, so I have a bias in that point. But when it comes to comparing our social organizations with other species, oftentimes I have the impression, that's just an impression, that the main idea is that humans and primates are quite close, regardless some small differences. But what I found in your paper was the comparative behavioral adaptations that seems to make humans much closer to carnivores than to primates when it comes to social organization. And could you please go quickly through these 7 features that served to in that comparative approach?
Well, I think the main one, I mean, let's say the main one, but there are some others. The main one is the fact that we are sharing our food. So if you look at the chimpanzees, whenever they get food, they won't share it with anybody. They
Hmm.
just go to the side and eat it. Okay, because otherwise people will take it away
Mm.
from them.
Sorry. Mhm.
Humans actually share, and this is where ethnography can help, because that's really, regardless of any environment or any change, any different technology, regardless, it's really common to all hunter gatherers. They all share their food, not only with their family, but also with the whole
Others.
group. And this is what you find in in predators or in carnivores, but you don't find it in plant eaters, most of the time. I think one of the reasons is because the hunting is like obtaining a very large piece of food, okay, with lots of energies, lots of calories. But the fruit, if you obtain one fruit, I mean, there's little point in sharing it. So that's one aspect that where we actually have a carnivore.
I wrote them because I found it very interesting. So there was food sharing, food storage, cannibalism, surplus killing, interspecies intolerance, and alloparenting.
Alloparenting. Yeah, alloparenting is another one that is interesting. And this is it means that everybody raised the kids in the group. And this is again something that is common with carnivores. For instance, lions, the ants, okay, contribute quite a lot to the raising of the small ones, and it's common to humans as well. Uh, all in all, humans are even I think humans are the most social animal that ever existed. It's unbelievable how if you measure it in terms of how much you are willing to contribute to other people in the group, humans are, I think, even among carnivores are something special. Uh, and it helped us. It's not that that we are so kind and nice. Apparently, it was important in our evolution. All the help that is we do it like we teach, we spend time, we like to teach. uh, if you go to today, uh, what do people do when they finish working? They volunteer. Volunteering is the most common source of meaning for people who retire. So this I say in the book too. If you want to find meaning, find out what you can give to other people and commit yourself to that. The higher the commitment, the higher the meaning. So humans are really a very very special animal in terms of sociality. Is alloparenting. So that like the whole group raise the kid.
Hmm.
So again, it's sharing. It's also a form of sharing.
I see.
So and also we don't have the hierarchy uh, as chimpanzees, but that's there are predators with the hierarchy in the groups. Humans have much less hierarchy. Actually, they don't have any hierarchy in the group. So there are no group leaders. This is a recent phenomenon. In hunter-gatherers, you don't find leaders. You find people that are smarter than the others. You find people that have more respect. But all the decisions are taken in the group, by the group, and there's no one leader. Like in the chimpanzees or all the primates, there's a very structured hierarchy, okay? There's a top, there's the middle, there's the bottom. That doesn't exist in humans.
But do you think that because now our societies are built with hierarchies, And do you think that social anthropology could at some point come with the evolution of nutrition to explain that maybe once we went into the agricultural revolution, then you see this, like hierarchy rising again?
Of course, that depends because then you have, the possession or territory that you have, and you have to protect it. And actually, in order to maintain hierarchy level, you have to have, the people that work and supply the top people that don't work
Mhm.
with the food and other means of survival. So you have to have hierarchy in order to exploit, to be able to exploit. I mean, hierarchy like feeds hierarchy.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, and once you have, once you can store uh, food, okay, it's food mainly. Once you can store foods, you can start to create hierarchy. When you cannot store food, when people have to get their food every day from nature, uh, and most people know how to do it, there's no way to actually create hierarchy.
Mhm.
Uh, Especially when you have the sharing. So the sharing also goes together with the hierarchy situation. And
Mhm.
there's no sharing in agricultural situation.
I see.
So yeah, of course, they go hand in hand together, nutrition and
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And the last one on the biological aspect, I would like you to inform us on the relationship between the type of food available and the ability for the human body as a terrestrial mammal to get in their active form the essentials, micronutrients, and vitamins that we need compared to plants, for example, or
I the whole, if we agree, and this is what I found, that humans were carnivores and most of their food came from meat and fat, it means that our body is adapted to get all the nutrients that it needs and micronutrients as well that it needs from uh, from meat. I mean, you can see it in Arctic societies. Okay, they eat, practically speaking, they used to. I mean, today they go to the grocery store, but they used to live practically only on meat and fat, and they survived till very old age. By the way, there are some fantastic evidence, uh, anecdotes that they say, and they say for them, people who live to 100, there is it's no exception. It's nothing special. And they lived only on meat and fat. So it means that, for instance, everybody talks about vitamin C. Okay, so how do you get vitamin C when you're a carnivore? Apparently, you don't need that much vitamin C if you're a carnivore because the sugar that you eat ruin the vitamin C, so you need more vitamin C. It competes with the sugar. So, so with the apparently in meat there is very little vitamin C, but that's all you need. All of course, all the most of the micronutrients are more available in the live form than from plants. Vitamin A, for instance. Uh, by the way, just a funny, not funny, but interesting point. 85,000 years ago, I mean, scientists can actually pinpoint the time of genetic changes sometime when it actually happened. And they found out that 85,000 years ago in Africa, people started to get a gene or got the gene that helped them to get omega 3 or EPA from vegetal omega 3. Yeah. Now, this happened 85,000 years ago. And if you go to the European, so what happens? Humans left Africa about 70,000 years ago, move, among other places, to Europe. And in Europe, you don't find these feds. It's called feds. You don't find these genes. Humans didn't need these genes to convert or to elongate the omega 3 from plants to DHA and EPA. So they don't find this, but they found it in Africa. So the conclusion, of course, that is in Africa about 85,000 years ago, uh, people start to eating more plants. So they had to become more adaptive to exploit omega 3 from plants to DHA. But when they came to Europe, yeah, they did not have that demand. There were enough animals in Europe, enough large animals. Of course, later on, they also got extinct. So humans are adapted to get, you know, of course, uh, the iron. Yeah.
But I remembered, so from that adaptation of the gene, how much from that plant consumption could people get as a omega-3 DHA EPA? Was it like 100% of it, or was it just
No, 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 no. A little bit more. A little bit. The gene change was slight. That's what they say in the paper. Slightly more, slightly more from vegetable sources. So most of it still came from animal sources.
so it was not the main source, it was just some time to
No, but look, today we have to be honest. Today, uh, vegans, I don't think that they show any shortage of DHA. I mean, they have brains, more or less like ours. Some would say less and more, but they grow brains, and they don't eat any omega 3 or EPA or DHA.
they get the supplements.
They can, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think that it was really investigated. But I would say that, for instance, yeah, in India actually they eat milk. So even the vegetarians in India, they eat milk products.
And they cook ghee as well.
Ghee, yeah. Yeah, no, milk sources, whatever. Yeah. So ghee is also milk. uh, yeah, so there are not many vegans societies that can provide us with a good sample, but still they manage to live without eating DHA or EPA. So apparently we are already adapted, or most of us. By the way, that's the problem with vegans is that you don't really know to what extent you are actually adapted because human adapted in different levels. For instance, to convert, I don't remember the name of the vegetal form of vitamin A to vitamin A. Yeah. Uh, so genetically speaking, some people are more adapted, others are less adapted. So some people try vegans and leave it because they are not adapted, well adapted to it. So what you see is the long-term vegans may not be typical population. They may be the ones that are genetically more adapted to live like a vegan.
But many vegetarians, let's say, or vegans are saying, well, maybe we ate meat before. They do agree on that most of the time, and they're then saying, but it's been 10,000 years or 5,000 years, depending where you are on the planet, that we have evolved on eating plants. So we now are adapted. So my question is, how long does it take for a species to genetically or physiologically adapt to a change in its environment or nutrition? Is that so easy or is that so quick to happen?
There's the general answer is that it depends. It depends on the species. It depends on the difference between what the body can is built to take and what is the environmental change. If the environmental change is small, then it can adapt quite quickly. If the environmental change is big, it takes longer. Uh, in the case of humans and adapting to agricultural or to plants consumption, it happens from two sides. First of all, we adapt the plants to our physiology. Okay, this is the difference between us and other animals. We take the plants, we take the food, and we change it in a culture using our technology. Yeah. If you look at what happened, most of the technology that we have is aimed at removing removing fiber. For instance, when people domesticated wheat, okay, the one of the advantages of wheat is that with the mechanical means you can remove the fiber, so you end up only with the flour. You pound it and then you expose it to wind and etc. etc. And then what happens actually that you're working on removing the fiber and ending up with something that we can digest. However, I know from a personal level that I have problem digesting wheat because I have a gluten sensitivity. So a lot of people have gluten sensitivity. Most of them don't know that because it's not only celiac that. So sorry. So yeah, people adapt, and adaptation can take place very quickly. Take for example milk. So we are adapted. Some of us are adapted to exploit the sugar in milk, uh, lactose, yeah. Uh, and this adaptation happened quite recently, since we started eating milk. Milk is not a general, natural food that's available for hunter-gatherers. Nobody is going to milk bison. But it became available with agriculture, and those people that you know their economy was based on exploiting milk evolved the ability to exploit lactose beyond their beyond the first 1 or 2 years when they're feeding on milk. So yeah, this adaptation happened, And other adaptations probably also happen. For instance, the one that we know is to exploit omega-3 uh, vegetables or vegetation source fats, oils to EPA and DHA. So the ability you have to have certain uh, enzymatic processes to turn a normal omega-3 to EPA and DHA. These are the ones that we need.
That would be still a small percentage, right?
Yeah, yeah. And but but some people have that ability, and it evolved in Africa about 85,000 years ago. Uh, by the way, in Europe, it did not evolve at that time. It did not evolve even 30 years ago, 30,000 years ago. So in Europe, they continue to eat mainly meat, or still more meat. In Africa, apparently, about 85,000 years ago, humans started to eat uh, more plants. So there was a need to adapt to that. The problem, the practical problem, is that none of us knows exactly what is a genetic composition is, and what is sensitive or insensitive, or will be sensitive or insensitive. For instance, milk. I think a lot of people that drink milk and a lot of people that have problems don't know that they have a problem, that the problem stem from eating milk, or that we talked about the gluten sensitivity. A lot of people that have gluten sensitivity, not celiac, because celiac you would almost die if you consume the gluten. So actually, I said that I wish I had celiac instead of gluten sensitivity, because at that time I would have, you know, avoided the gluten. But I continued consuming gluten since till I was 58. And when I removed the gluten, a lot of things happened. And but I didn't know. I didn't know, and I think most of us are in this situation. We don't know whether we are adapted. Whatever adaptation took place, it was partial. Only, for instance, you have in the Andes tribes that are groups that are rely very heavily on consumption of like potatoes, right? Tubers. But they have specific genetic adaptation to consuming a lot of tubers to deal with the poisons that they have in the tubers develop to protect themselves, and to deal with the lack of vitamins that you get when you eat mainly tubers and very little meat. So they got specific adaptations. So some of us in some places have specific adaptations to consume more plants. That's correct. The problem is that most of us don't know that we have or don't have.
Maybe I don't know if you agree or not, but specific adaptation, like what you mentioned, does not necessarily mean optimal.
True, true, too. It's a solution to a problem, and the solution is maybe partial. Sure.
There is one thing that most people are not very familiar with. It's a stable isotope measurement. It's a very specific measurement that. So could you break it down and explain how is it related to carnivore when it comes to human species and human trophy?
Yeah. Okay. So stable isotopes are used in archaeology to determine trophic level. And this is really the only tool that the archaeology has to say what was the trophic level in direct manner. I mean, you can learn from archaeology other like we discussed before, what type of animals you hunt, etc., etc. But just to tell you directly what was the trophic level, really stable isotope is the only method. And it takes advantage of the fact that certain isotopes of nitrogen get accumulated in the body as the trophic level rise. So there is a nitrogen in the plants, and small part of it appears in stable isotopes. Stable isotopes can be detected. It has to do with the number of particles in the atom itself, uh, how heavy it is, etc. So it can be detected. So plants have certain level of these isotopes, and when herbivores eat the plants, they accumulate into their body a certain level of isotopes, which is higher than the one because they concentrate it. And actually, the carnivores that eat the herbivores concentrate this stable isotope even further. So, in the relative uh, content of the isotopes, you can actually determine uh, if an animal was a carnivore or a herbivore. Okay, so the trophic level, yeah. So the trophic level is not only carnivore or herbivores; it's actually can be one and a half. So like it depends on this ratio of plants and animal matter. So the problem with this method is that it requires collagen to be preserved in the bones or the teeth. And that doesn't preserve past 50,000 years ago. So the oldest nitrogen isotopes can only found in bones from 50,000 years ago or younger. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's also mainly in cold areas where the collagen maintained. Yeah. So I would say the most of the work was done in Europe, uh, even as down as Sicily too. So it's not only Northern Europe, but mainly in Belgium, in France, in the northern, or it's not northern, but central parts of Europe. Uh, and really, like almost 100% of the studies that were done 50, 40, 30,000 years ago, even earlier, found that humans were carnivores. There were even more carnivores than carnivores. In other words, they had a higher uh, nitrogen isotope content than carnivores. And the explanation that the researchers gave is that they actually consumed a higher proportion of larger herbivores. So larger herbivores apparently accumulate more protein or more concentrated protein uh, isotopes than smaller herbivores. And since humans were feeding on the larger herbivores, they had a higher content than even other carnivores that ate smaller herbivores. So in that case, I mean, I don't know if it's tens at least tens of studies where humans, and by the way, these are Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, no matter. They all come out as carnivores in the studies. The last one that I saw is from Sicily, where they had bones from, let's say, 15,000 years ago, and then, I don't know where exactly, but let's say about 10,000 years ago, and then 6,000 years ago. So already 6,000 years ago is already the Neolithic in Sicily. And they found that in the Neolithic, the people were consuming much more plants. uh, but 15,000 years ago, people were carnivores. And 10,000 years ago, they moved from terrestrial mammals to aquatic uh, diet, so fish. And only then they moved to plants. So, and ties very nicely with the energetic return that you find in hunter-gatherers today, where the highest energetic return comes from hunting, the next in line is fishing, and only then from plants, from consuming plants.
I think that the interesting point in that stable isotope measurement is that if you say that you can only preserve collagen for 40 to 50,000 years, that means that even at that, let's imagine that the oldest collagen we can find is 40,000 years from now. That would correspond to what you described as already an early adaptation to the extinction of the megafauna and the bone and arrows tools, and then more plants consumption. So even though from what you said that if we accept that assumption that humans were already turning towards smaller animals or maybe more plants, even though the human trophic level on the stable isotope showed that they were quite high in carnivore still.
Yes, yes, we were carnivore really until the very end, until we had to start agriculture. Until then, we started to eat more plants towards the end. There are other sources of evidence, for instance, the stone tools. So you see, in the end, I'm talking about maybe in the not in Europe, but yeah, in the end, you find stone tools that are used for grinding. Uh, and they are very big and very heavy stone tools that are like pedestal, like that they use for grinding. And you see also that people stop moving that much. So the camps become more invested. They have more semi permanent buildings, etc. So you see that they start to sit down and to exploit more plants towards the end.
Yeah. Well, that was my last, I mean, one of the last questions I had is that you have spoken many times about the association between megafauna extinction and the progressive changes of human diets, variability, cooking tools, hunting techniques. But in your opinion, to which extent the human carnivore's specialization played a role in the megafauna extinction?
Oh, I just published a paper about it. The In the paper, I show that the fact that humans needed fat caused them to hunt in a way that caused the extinction. So if you look back 65 million years ago, at that time, the dinosaurs went extinct and the mammals began to rule the earth, sort of. So, and they become to grow. We started from a small, several hundred grams rodent and ended up with a 12 tons elephant about 2.5 million years ago. We had the average size of terrestrial mammals was about 500 kilos. That's the average. So there were many big animal species, but we now we there are very few species of big animals, and many species of small animals. And the fact that we needed, so what it means is that actually being large without humans is an advantage because animals became larger and larger and larger and larger. And like I said, you can exploit low quality, sorry, low quality food, so you can overcome periods of crisis, of dryness, etc. And it pays to be larger. But when humans arrived on the scene, it started to be a problem. So humans actually, the problem with the large animals is that it takes them many years to grow. So when you start to hunt them, to recover, they're very, very, very difficult to recover for them. So they started to disappear. And for this, I have a few papers as well. I measure we as a team measure the percentage of large animals in the archaeological sites, and we find out that it comes down and down and down and down. So they start to disappear. Or they started disappearing, according to what I can say, about 1,000,000 years ago, with the Homo erectus. He hunted large animals, and they started disappearing. Species, for instance, there was a species in Africa of elephant that weighed 12 tons and was replaced by a species that weighed 4 tons. There were many, actually, there were more than one species of elephants in Africa. Today there are only two, one in the forest and one in the, there were 5 or 6 species. So the species disappear, large animal species. And this is one, that humans began to hunt large animals, caused a stress on them, and they could not recover because they are not like small animals that grow fast and they can recover. The other thing that humans did was hunting what's called prime adults. So if you take the population of animals, there are the younger ones, the adults, and the old. Now, if you take, for instance, wolves, they hunt the young and the old because they are not as fast as the adults. They are not as experienced as the adults. They are not as forceful as the adults. So they're easier to get. But humans actually concentrated on hunting the prime adults. So the most difficult animals in the herd to hunt, they concentrated on those. It does not make sense for a predator to concentrate on the animal that is more difficult to obtain. But that's the animal that had the fat. So the old ones, they don't eat a lot, so they don't have a lot of fat. The young ones need the fat to grow. They don't have a lot of fat. It so happens that the adults have the highest level of fat. Now, the problem with the adults is that they are actually the engine of the growth. They provide the new members of the group. But if you hunt them, they will not do it. So that's another pressure. And the third pressure is that humans used to exploit only the fatty parts. So they would hunt the animal, but they will not take and will not utilize only the fatty parts. Now, other animals do that too, but they do it in time of plenty. If you look at the savanna in Africa, for instance, you see that when all the gnus, the millions of gnus pass through, the lions will hunt them and eat only part of them, usually the fatty part. But this doesn't cause a lot of stress because this is the time of plenty. But humans actually need to use the fatty parts in time of shortage because they don't have fat from other animals. So they hunt the animal and they use only the fat in the animal. So they cause pressure on the groups of animals when actually they are already under stress. So these three patterns actually can explain why the extinctions happened when humans arrive. Uh,
I have one question. If someone say, well, do you know, how did you define that humans used to hunt prime adult animals?
yeah, in what happens in the teeth in these animals, you can see in the teeth the age.
Mm.
So when zoologists study a certain site, they can tell what the age of the animals was by the from the teeth. Yeah.
Okay, the blue zones. Um, I came at some point to this Netflix documentary about the blue zones, and I, I was a bit surprised about certain things, and especially on the episode in Sardinia. And I come from Marseille in the south of France. You know, the rocks are limestone where I grew up, and I think Sardinia are the same. The whole southern Mediterranean in many places are like that. And the documentary was showing this, I think it was about 800, maybe 900 meters altitude with limestone. And if you've been in this environment, you know that not much vegetables will grow. It's a very dry and rocky environment. So you only have small herbs like thyme and, this kind of thing, rosemary. Uh, and then they show the kitchen, and the kitchen is full of heavy water vegetables, like eggplant, tomatoes, and all these kind of recent vegetables. And I was thinking, how come the ancestors of these people could get these vegetables there? It doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know what is your opinion on these blue zones claiming that people are mainly almost vegetarian.
Look, there are two problems with that blue zone. One is the information, and the other one is the situation. The information is very bad. Is really uh, it's example of people that are drawing a point and then trying to find all the evidence for their opinion. And Sardinia is a very good example because Sardinia people get to 100, but these are mainly people that live in the mountains, and in the mountain nothing grows. They actually the most of the economy is from herding goats, right? So they eat the most of their food come from milk and meat of the goats. And once I saw uh, a documentary about Sardinia, and this guy was uh, his whole career was taking the genes and examining what is the difference in the genes between the Sardinians and the rest of the world. He was looking for the gene that gives them the 100 years length in life. And all of a sudden, one of the Sardinians came to the crew, to the camera crew, and said, we don't tell them, but we eat a lot of fat. And so, really, that's what he said. So That guy had, he was looking for he never found the genes, by the way, because it's not the genes. The genes are the same. Only the food is different. And so, yeah, and then these guys come along with the blue zones, and actually they go mainly to the cities at the bottom of the. And these cities, of course, they get all the necessary, all the agricultural products that they don't get in the mountains. Uh, and then he like used the length, the longevity of the mountains to justify the food near the port. Yeah, crazy. This is one thing. This is one thing. The other thing is that if you take an island, you take a population of the island, it can get genetically adapted to the food of that island. So, so the people that let's say if you have gluten sensitivity and the food on that island is mainly wheat or large part of it is wheat, after a few hundred years you won't have people with gluten sensitivity because they would not survive, or they will have less kids than people who don't have gluten sensitivity. So what happens is the population get adapted to the specific food regime. Okay, so and then you compare it to the Western world where we are not adapted to this food, and they live longer. The other thing is, of course, is the community and all the mental aspects of living in a close community where each support the other, etc. That's also very, very important. Uh, yeah.
So, in conclusion, from all the studies you've done in that field, would you say that we are obligate carnivore and with some adaptation to some reality, which led us to be able to consume other form of food, but we may not be the food that we evolved on so many millions of years?
Look, I'd like to talk in terms of safety when it comes to drawing conclusions. Uh, the problem is we went through some changes, and I said some people are more adapted to milk than others, some people are more adapted to gluten than others, etc., etc. And as we know, all plants have poisons in them of one form or another. Some we may be able to extract by washing, by cooking, by whatever means, by fermenting, all these systems. But we're never able to extract all of them. And some of us are more sensitive than others. The problem is that we don't know. We don't have, not many of us do this genetic testing, and we don't know to what extent we are sensitive to problems in plants. What we do know that we don't have any problems with meat because we evolved our own meat for 2.5 million years. So in terms of safety, that's my conclusion. Why? I mean, of course, I know why, but if you want to be safe, the more protein you eat, the more meat you eat, the more fat from animal you eat, the safer you are. That's my conclusion.
Yeah, yeah, and I usually get to speak to some people who have this negative way of thinking about meat, and they believe that we should, you know, eat as less meat as possible. And I wish that there are some producers on TV that would finance a TV reality show and would send on a equatorial forest or Amazonia maybe 10 carnivores and 10 vegans, and they would live on the same kind of place, right? And the wins, let's say, the $1 million prize would be the team with the best maybe survivors. Let's imagine we leave them 6 months. So just to apply the theory of can you live and survive efficiently and in a healthy way without eating, without hunting, basically. Because every documentaries I watch on BBC Earth or, like National Geographic, when they go to follow these tribes that still live in these very plant environments, forest or anything, they just hunt all day long. They bring back monkeys or fish or capybara, or I mean, yeah, they do kind of beers sometimes, or they use the leaf to make roof. But I didn't see these tribes coming with like big bags of leaf and just dropping them and, oh, let's, you know.
No, the people that live in the jungle, most of them practice some kind of agriculture, very, rudimentary type of agriculture. They do grow, tubers, some kind of roots. Uh, Actually, I don't think they could live on the jungle uh, without that. There are not enough, meat around. The animals are small. They're difficult to find. They need the meat. This is just the proof how badly they need the micronutrients in the meat that they actually go hunting and spend hours just hunting a small bat, fruit bat or something. But humans did not live in a jungle. Humans evolved in the savannah, in open spaces. The jungle is an environment where there are more plant matter and much less living matter. And also it's difficult to find. So, for instance, you see in Congo, there are some groups that live, and some of them even hunt elephants. They're like forest type elephants, smaller than the one in the savannah. But they hunt it very rarely, and when they do, they actually do a swap with the farmers in the area, where they give them meat and get some, because they could not live without this swap. They could not live. They go work for them, etc., etc. So, environment, jungle environment is not natural environment for human. This is another problem with the, relying on ethnographic data. Yeah, you,
But usually in jungle, they live close to a river, most quite often.
yeah, sure. Yeah, humans. Look, human needs water. Yeah, human needs to live near lakes or rivers. Yeah.
Mm. I've been to South Africa recently, and of course, when you go to the savannah for safari and you look at the environment, you think, what could I eat as a vegetable or like vegetation? I mean, that's very questioning.
Right. There's not much. Absolutely. That's what I would do. I would take these vegans and let them go to savannah and say, okay, now live as vegans. Let's see. And this is the actually the good simulation. Okay, now we give them some stone tools and the know-how. Okay, I won't expect them to accumulate the know-how by themselves. So I will give them all the know-how, the stone tools, and in the savannah, yeah, and let's see how they live on a vegan diet. No way. There is none. There is no there's no food there. Sometimes there's some tubers, etc., but they would die. They would not be able to do.
So, well, that was great. Um, I think paleoanthropology is an archaeology are not famous subject, but they are very valuable in my opinion, as they bring a lot of lights into our past. And well, thank you for bringing all your knowledge here. Um, Today, where are you communicating what you do? Do you have a blog or a website?
No, I have a blog, but I'm not that active. I'm most of the thing that I do today are actually academic papers. Uh, sometimes I'm active on Twitter. Uh, that's the only real social media that I'm attending to from time to time. But I tell you, I just have uh, some academic work to do to convince uh, people of science. Uh, you have to write a paper and another paper and a book, like drops of water to get your findings through. So that's what I do mostly today.
So we will put in the description all the links from your papers, also from your book, so people can get more into it if they're interested in it.
Yeah, the book, the book talk about the more about the mental mismatch than the than the nutrition. But there is something about nutrition too, about the Weston Price, etc., that you mentioned.
But I mean, it goes together at some point. You know, what you eat has an impact um, on the mind.
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
So, well, thank you again.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We wish you the best for the future academic papers. See you soon, and thanks for your help, Dr. Ben-Dor.
Okay, you're most welcome. Bye bye.